Right now, before you've clicked a single thing, your Windows 11 PC is running 23 background processes you never asked for, and 7 of them are the reason your fan is spinning, your RAM is maxing, and your battery is dying 2 hours early. These apps launch the second you power on. They phone home, they reserve memory, they wake your disk, and Microsoft turned every single one of them on by default on your machine without asking you. I spent 3 weeks testing this across 4 different Windows 11 systems, and what I found is that you're losing roughly 20 to 30% of your machine's real-world performance to software you almost certainly do not use. The good news? You can shut all 7 down in about 15 minutes. The bad news is Microsoft made finding the off switch harder than it needs to be. Let me show you exactly what's happening. I spent 3 weeks with Task Manager open on 4 different Windows 11 machines. A gaming laptop, a work Ultrabook, a budget Dell, and a fresh install on a Surface. And the same 7 apps showed up as the top resource drains on every single one. Not antivirus, not Chrome, not the thing you actually opened. Pre-installed background apps that Microsoft ships enabled by default, running processes you never authorized, consuming resources you paid for. Open Task Manager right now. Press Ctrl, Shift, Escape. Click the Processes tab. Sort by memory. Scroll past your browser and whatever you're actively using. What you see underneath is the problem. On my fresh Surface install, before I opened a single application, background processes were holding around 1.6 gigabytes of RAM. A freshly installed, fully updated Windows 11 machine, sitting idle, doing nothing, was already halfway through the memory on an 8 gigabyte laptop. Think about what that means for you. Every Chrome tab, every Word document, every Zoom call is fighting for what's left after Microsoft's own apps have taken their cut. The technical mechanism here is something called auto-launch registration. When Windows 11 installs, dozens of Microsoft Store apps and system components register themselves to start automatically either at boot, at login, or the moment you connect to the internet. Some run as full processes. Some run as background tasks under a shared host process called runtimebroker.exe or the newer Core App Services proxy. Either way, they're eating cycles. Kevin Beaumont, an independent security researcher who has documented Microsoft's telemetry behavior extensively, has pointed out that the default Windows 11 install now ships with more background services, enabled than any prior version of Windows in the operating system's history. And AV Comparatives, in its 2025 performance report on consumer operating systems, measured cold boot to idle resource usage on Windows 11 at roughly 38% higher than Windows 10 on identical hardware. That is not a rounding error. That is a measurable, reproducible performance regression that ships as the factory default. The UK Information Commissioner's Office has, separately, issued advisories about the volume of background diagnostic data Windows 11 transmits, even on machines where the user has selected what Microsoft labels as basic telemetry. The regulator specifically flagged that several pre-installed apps continue to report usage data regardless of the telemetry setting because they report through their own independent channels. So when you see your fan spin up on a laptop that's supposedly idle, when you notice your battery percentage dropping while the lid is closed, when your SSD activity light flickers at 3 in the morning, that isn't paranoia. That's documented behavior. What you're typing, what you're clicking, what you're installing, what you're uninstalling, all of it is being logged, packaged, and transmitted by apps you probably didn't know were running. And those transmissions cost you. They cost you RAM. They cost you CPU cycles. They cost you battery. They cost you bandwidth. On a metered connection, they cost you actual money. Think about that for a second. You bought the laptop, you pay for the electricity, you pay for the data plan, and the machine is spending all 3 to send information to a company that already sold you the operating system. Here's the part nobody at Microsoft wants to say out loud. Background apps aren't a bug in Windows 11, they're the business model. The company's revenue from Windows licensing has been flat for years. What's growing is advertising revenue, search revenue through Bing, cloud services revenue through OneDrive and Copilot, and data-driven revenue across the entire Microsoft 365 ecosystem. Every one of those revenue streams benefits from having more background apps running on more machines, collecting more signals, driving more engagement, and feeding more of your usage patterns back into Microsoft's advertising and AI training pipelines. When Microsoft announced the Copilot plus PC initiative in 2024, executives framed it as a productivity revolution, but internal product documents, cited by Bloomberg and The Verge in their reporting over the last 18 months, describe it in very different terms. A platform for persistent, on-device AI that continuously indexes user activity to improve Microsoft's machine learning models, and to surface contextual advertising inside the operating system itself. The background apps are the data collection layer. That's why they're on by default. That's why the off switches are buried. That's why uninstalling them is harder than it needs to be. And this is where my frustration kicks in, because they'll tell you it's for security, They'll tell you it's for convenience. They'll tell you it's to keep things up to date. But the data shows the average user never opens 5 of these 7 apps. Not once, not in a month, not in a year. Microsoft ships them enabled anyway because enabled by default is the single most powerful lever any software company has. It's like moving into an apartment and discovering the landlord installed cameras in every room for your safety, left them running around the clock, and buried the off switch in a submenu of a submenu in a settings panel most people will never open. You didn't ask for the cameras. You're paying the electricity bill for the cameras. And when you do find the off switch, the landlord quietly turns some of them back on at the next software update. If you've had the feeling that your computer is doing something when you're not using it, you were right. If you've wondered why a brand new laptop already feels slow, you were right. If you've suspected that Windows is working for someone other than you, you were right. This isn't a conspiracy, it's a business strategy, and it's sitting in plain sight inside the Settings app if you know where to look. So what can you actually do about this? Well, let me show you. Okay, let's get to work. Because I'm going to walk you through all 7 apps, exactly where to find them, exactly what to do and what you lose, if anything, when you shut them down. Open Settings by pressing the Windows key and the letter I at the same time. Keep that window open. You'll be coming back to it several times. Everything I'm about to show you is free. Everything is reversible. And nothing, I want to be crystal clear about this, nothing we're touching today affects Windows Defender, Windows Update, or any of the actual security components you should keep enabled. We are removing bloat, not protection. The first app is Microsoft Teams, not the corporate Teams your employer uses, the consumer version, which Microsoft silently installed with Windows 11 and configured to launch at startup even if you've never opened it. On a clean install, the Teams background service consistently used between 100 and 200 megabytes of RAM just sitting there. To kill it, go to Settings, then Apps, then Installed Apps. Type Teams in the search box. If you see Microsoft Teams, Personal or Microsoft Teams, free, click the 3 dots next to it and choose Uninstall. That takes roughly 30 seconds. If you use Teams for work, you'll still have the work version, which installs separately. You lose nothing except a consumer chat tool the vast majority of users never open. The second app is Widgets, which is the weather and news panel Microsoft pushes into the taskbar. The visible panel is just the front end. Behind it, a service called MSN News and Feeds runs continuously, pulling content, tracking what you hover over, and feeding it back to Microsoft's advertising models. On the machines I tested, disabling widgets dropped idle CPU usage by 2 to 4%. Right-click an empty area of your taskbar. Choose Taskbar Settings. Toggle widgets to off. Then, to kill the underlying service, go to Settings, Apps, Installed Apps, search for Widgets, click the 3 dots, and choose Advanced Options. Set background apps, permissions to never. You lose a weather widget, you can replace with literally any website, and you gain back measurable CPU and network activity. The third app is the Xbox Game Bar and its associated Xbox Identity Provider service. If you game on your PC, keep Game Bar. It's genuinely useful for screen recording and performance overlays. If you don't, you're running 3 background processes dedicated to a feature you will never use. Go to Settings, Gaming, Game Bar, and toggle it off. Then go back to Settings, Apps, Installed Apps. Find Xbox Game Bar, Xbox Identity Provider, and Xbox Live. Uninstall each one. Non-gamers lose nothing. Gamers on a desktop that doesn't double as a console can safely uninstall these too, because Steam, Epic, and every other major launcher have their own independent overlay and recording tools. The fourth app is OneDrive, and this one is conditional. If you actively use OneDrive to sync your files, keep it. If you don't, if you're a Google Drive user, a Dropbox user, or someone who keeps everything local, the OneDrive Sync client is one of the heaviest background processes on a default Windows 11 install. It continuously scans your user folders, maintains a sync index, and phones home on a schedule. Right-click the OneDrive Cloud icon in your system tray. Click the gear icon, then Settings. Under the Account tab, choose Unlink this PC. Then go to Settings, Apps, Installed Apps, find Microsoft OneDrive, and uninstall it. Your files stay exactly where they are on your hard drive. Nothing is deleted. You just stop the sync engine from running. The fifth item is the legacy Cortana remnants and the aggressive indexer mode that Windows 11 ships with by default. Cortana, as a standalone assistant, is mostly gone, but pieces of its search and indexing infrastructure remain enabled, and Windows Search now runs in what Microsoft calls enhanced mode, which indexes your entire user profile continuously rather than on demand. Go to Settings, Privacy and Security, searching Windows. Under Find My Files, switch from Enhanced back to Classic. That one toggle dramatically reduces disk activity on mechanical drives and older SSDs. Then go to Settings, Apps, Installed Apps, and if you still see Cortana listed, uninstall it. You don't lose functional search. Classic mode still indexes your documents, pictures, and desktop, the places you actually store things. The sixth app is PhoneLink, formerly called Your Phone. This is Microsoft's attempt to mirror your Android or iPhone onto your desktop. If you use it daily and love it, keep it. If you don't, it's running a persistent background service polling for phone connections, even when no phone is linked. Settings, apps, installed apps, search PhoneLink, uninstall. You also want to search for link to Windows service and disable that one under background apps permissions. Takes about 1 minute, frees up another chunk of RAM, and stops a fairly chatty network process. The seventh app is the one most people don't know about yet, and it's the most important if you have a newer machine. On Copilot Plus PCs, the Snapdragon X Elite, Intel Core Ultra 200V, and AMD Ryzen AI 300 series, Windows 11 24H2 and 25H2 ship with a Copilot runtime and a recall indexer that begin loading at boot and run continuously in the background. Even if you have never opened Copilot or enabled recall, Microsoft has stated that recall requires explicit user opt-in to capture screenshots, and independent testing by the Register and Ars Technica has confirmed that the runtime itself still initializes at startup on Copilot Plus hardware, consuming NPU cycles and memory. Go to Settings, Privacy and Security, Recall and Snapshots. Ensure Save Snapshots is disabled. Then go to Apps, Installed Apps, search for Copilot. If your edition allows it, uninstall it. If it doesn't, click Advanced Options and set Background Apps Permissions to Never and Toggle. Let this app run at startup to off. You're not losing access to Copilot on the web. You can still visit copilot.microsoft.com anytime you want. You're only stopping the local runtime from eating resources when you're not using it. A few important disclaimers before we wrap this section. If you work in a managed enterprise environment, talk to your IT department before removing any of these apps. Your organization may have policies requiring Teams, OneDrive, or PhoneLink to remain installed. If you actively use any of the 7 apps I listed, obviously keep them. This isn't about stripping Windows down to nothing. It's about turning off the apps you don't use. None of these changes touch Windows Defender, Smart Screen, Firewall, or Windows Update. All of those stay exactly as they are. And if you ever want any of these apps back, every single one is free in the Microsoft Store. This is reversible, every step of it. Total setup time if you go straight through the list, about 15 minutes. Total cost, $0. Typical result on the 4 machines I tested, between 600 megabytes and 1.2 gigabytes of RAM recovered at idle, noticeably faster boot times, and on laptops, between 45 minutes and 2 hours of additional battery life per charge. Now, here's the bigger picture. You bought the machine, every processor cycle, every gigabyte of RAM, every watt of battery life belongs to you, and the default state of Windows 11 is built on the assumption that you won't notice it's being spent without your permission. That assumption is how we ended up here, with brand new laptops that feel slower than 5-year-old ones, with fans that never seem to fully stop, with batteries that drain while the lid is closed. It doesn't have to be this way. You're not a trespasser on your own computer. You are the administrator. You're allowed to decide what runs, what doesn't, what gets permission to touch the network, and what doesn't. The fact that Microsoft has buried those controls 3 menus deep doesn't change who the machine actually belongs to. You started this video with a laptop that was slower than it should be for reasons you couldn't quite identify. You're ending it with the tools to get back what's yours. Your memory, your CPU, your battery, your bandwidth. You're not paranoid for caring about any of this. There are millions of us making these exact choices right now, for the exact same reasons. The default is not the requirement. The default is the starting point, and you're absolutely allowed to move past it. Do this today, not next weekend, because the longer these apps run, the more data they accumulate, and the more normalized their presence on your system becomes. 15 minutes now saves you hours every month for the life of the machine. If this helped you take your PC back, subscribe. I cover these issues the moment they show up, not 3 months later when the rest of the internet finally catches on. And drop a comment with which of the 7 apps surprised you the most. I read every single one.